welcome to a very special show, Bangladesh Decides. I'm Gauri Dwivedi, and the next half an hour I will tell you why this is the most consequential election in the country and its impact on India. The Bangladesh-China-Pakistan nexus that needs to be addressed. But let me first get you the big developments that are unfolding on Bangladesh's day of elections. First Bangladesh election where voters are given two ballots, one asking them to vote for their next Prime Minister and the second on constitutional reform suggested by Mohammad Yunus, including setting term limits on the Prime Minister's tenure. First Bangladesh election where there are no Begums in the fray, no Sheikh Hasina, no Khaleda Zia. This is also the election where women have been relegated to the back, with Jamaat-e-Islami refusing to field even a single woman candidate. India remains cautious and in wait-and-watch mode as Bangladesh goes to polls. There are significant geopolitical and strategic interests at stake for India, including fortifying its chicken's neck. 48 hours before the polls were to begin, another Bangladeshi Hindu was brutally attacked and killed. Do the 7.5% of Bangladeshi population, that is the Hindus, have a voice in these elections? Both the main contenders have traditionally been anti-minority and anti-Hindu. Most consequential election for Dhaka. In fact, in a generation, this comes after a student uprising that led to 1,400 people losing their lives, the outcome of which will actually reshape the entire region. Now, first the numbers here, viewers. Total of 50 political parties in total are contesting these polls. There are about 1,755 candidates who are in the fray. There are 273 independents also who are contesting these elections. There are 299 constituencies. The Election Commission has said there are about 12.77 crore eligible voters who are in the fray. 6.48 crore are men, 6.28 crore are women, who, by the way, do not have a voice in these elections. This is also the very first election in Bangladesh where Gen Z are said to be the most determining voting bloc after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina that was led by a student uprising. There are now two main political factions here. There is the Jamaat-e-Islami led 11-party faction, and there is Tariq Rahman, whose mother was the first woman Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Before we go any further, I want to first play out this soundbite of Shafiqur Rahman, the man who's leading that 11-party faction of Jamaat-e-Islami. And then we get in my colleague Saurabh Gupta, who's on ground tracking these elections for us. But first up, Shafiqur Rahman.
It is a turning point, and we are waiting for that point, inshallah. People's demand change, they desire change, we also desire the change. I have given my vote after 3 consecutive votes where I was been deprived. Not me also, all the people of Bangladesh, and that time I was in the prison.
আমি ব্যক্তিগতভাবে দৃঢ়ভাবে বিশ্বাস করি বাংলাদেশের মানুষ আজকে সারাদিনে বেরিয়ে এসে যদি তাদের অধিকার প্রয়োগ করেন ইনশাআল্লাহ যে কোনো ষড়যন্ত্র
Those essentially were the two key voices for this election. I'm going to first tell you exactly what the opinion polls seem to suggest for these elections, and then we get in Saurabh. Now, as far as the EAST survey is concerned, that actually gives a decisive victory for Tariq-led BNP. About 208 out of 300 seats is for the BNP-led alliance as far as this first survey is concerned. Jamaat-e-Islami is set to win about 46 odd seats. 66% is the kind of support for BNP as against 12% for Jamaat-e-Islami. And most importantly, 80% of the Awami League voters have now shifted firmly in favor of BNP. So that's the big trend that the first opinion poll is suggesting. Now, the IILD poll is actually suggesting a far tighter race between the two factions, which says that it could actually go down to the wire. 105 for the Jamaat-e-Islami, 101 for the BNP. This actually means a picture being completely different, where Jamaat-e-Islami leading the way as against the first poll. Let's now get in Saurabh joining us live from Dhaka to tell us more in terms of how things are looking. Saurabh, Good to have you on the broadcast. You've been there last couple of days. You've been spending time in Bangladesh, speaking to all sides. What's the sense that you're getting first and foremost from the ground, the most important issue for the voters in these elections?
Well, since the morning at the main voting centres, there's been a considerable crowd and lines of voters who've been turning up to vote. Now, this is, of course, the polling booth where the Jamaat-e-Islami chief voted himself. There are also a lot of women voters who are turning up to vote. And voters, of course, are important. Now, if we could ask some of these voters also some questions. How important are these? How important are these elections for you?
আমাদের ইলেকশন আজকে হচ্ছে, আমরা যেহেতু বাংলাদেশের, আমি বাংলাতেই বলছি যে আজকে আমাদের অনেক বছর পরে অনেক খুশির একটা দিন, আমরা স্বাধীনভাবে ভোট দিতে পারছি। এর চেয়ে বড় খুশি আর কিছুই হতে পারে না। আমরা সবাই খুব খুশি এবং ভালোভাবে ইলেকশন হচ্ছে এবং সকাল থেকে আমরা সবাই খুব সুন্দরভাবে আমরা এনজয় করছি এবং ভোট দিচ্ছি। জয় বাংলাদেশ।
That's important. What she says is, of course, that that they've been voting since morning and that people are being allowed to vote, which they say is something that they appreciate, and using that right to vote, they of course will choose a new government. And that's so important because remember, this is an election that's so important for so many reasons. Now, for so many years, the politics in Bangladesh was defined by a battle between two women, Begum Khaleda Zia, who led the BNP, and Sheikh Hasina, who led the Awami League. That has changed completely in this election. Now it's a battle between the Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The BNP led by Tariq Rahman, the Jamaat led by Shafiqur Rahman. Both have cast their votes. Both seemed confident in the morning. Tariq Rahman, of course, said that security, protection of everybody, security of women would be his top priority. The Jamaat chief said he's also confident of the party's performance.
Indeed, whether it goes down to the wire and what really transpires after that is going to be extremely important. But sort of one more thing I want to ask you is, you spoke to a very spirited voter who's of course very optimistic about the future of Bangladesh and should be. But this is also an election where you have a referendum as well, right? So there are two ballots. One, who's going to be the next prime minister, and those, of course, referendum, which is essentially Muhammad Yunus's legacy.
Absolutely. And the referendum, if it gets a yes vote, if the yes vote wins, then it is binding in a sense on Parliament to implement it. And that's something that's also going to be interesting because everyone here who's voting to elect a new government is also telling the government what direction it should take by means of that referendum, which has questions, and of course the voter has to choose only yes or no. And this, of course, decides Bangladesh's future, tenure of prime minister, and all of these things, which, of course, is the path that Bangladesh will choose for the future. So yes, the referendum is equally important because what it will do is it will give a kind of structure that the new government, whatever government is elected, will have to follow if the yes vote in the referendum wins.
Indeed. If that actually happens, that will of course be binding on whoever is the next Prime Minister of Bangladesh and will decide the framework in which the governance will take place. Thanks much, Saurabh, for filling us in with that perspective and that ground presence. Saurabh joining us from Mirpur in Dhaka. Now, in terms of the two main political factions, both of them have a history of being pro-Pakistan. And whether it is Tariq Rahman or whether it is Jamaat-e-Islami, which is led by Shafiqur Rahman, they both have a history of being more pro-Pakistan. Tariq Rahman, though, has been saying that he wants to start afresh and not just take the hardline view of his mother forward. Shafiqur Rahman, though, represents the hardline Islamist thought that has unfortunately now been mainstreamed in Bangladesh in the last 18 months. What do these two men essentially bring on the table? Their defining versions of how they wish to change Bangladesh. This report decodes that for you.
Bangladesh is heading into one of its most pivotal elections in decades, and the political chessboard has been flipped. After the ouster of Sheikh Hasina and the disqualification of the Awami League, the February 12th vote is now a two-horse race. On one side, Tariq Rahman's Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and on the other, Shafiqur Rahman's Jamaat-e-Islami. Former allies are now squaring off as fierce competitors. With Hasina's exile and Khalida Zia's passing away, the curtains are up on Bangladesh's fabled Battle of the Battle. The BNP enters as the front runner. It is contesting 292 out of 300 seats. It has the widest footprint on the ballot and leads a 10-party alliance. And in some surveys, it commands support as high as 66%. Tariq Rahman, son of former Prime Minister Khalida Zia, is banking on scale, structure and strong rural networks. And notably, women voters, where surveys reflect a commanding lead. On the other end is Jamaat-e-Islami, contesting 224 constituencies, leading an 11-party coalition, including the National Citizen Party, born from the 2024 student uprising. Recent polling suggests a tight electoral battle. One IILD survey shows the BNP-led alliance at 44.1% and the Jamaat-led bloc at 43.9%. Jamaat has gained ground among Gen Z and university voters, winning several campus elections. Its student wing, Islami Chhatra Shibir, is targeting young, educated demographics. As the electoral margin narrows, the BNP has sharpened its rhetoric against the Jamaat, terming it as anti-independence. The ballots will answer one question: who truly inherits the post-Hasina political landscape? Tariq Rahman or Shafiqur Rahman? Two polarizing figures, one ballot, and a nation holding its breath.
So now the 5 key questions that we are asking on the broadcast, and then we're going to get our guests as well. First and foremost, which way will the Gen Z vote go? Remember, this is an election that happened after a student uprising. So that vote bank is very crucial. Bangladesh also has a high number of young people. Will polls reset India ties? That's the second key important aspect. The last 18 months, Mohammad Yunus has actually presided over a drastic fall and dip as far as the India-Bangladesh relationship is concerned. Can that be repaired? Will Bangladeshi Hindus have a voice in these elections? Everybody remembers and knows that horrific video of Deepu Chandra Das that tells the story in itself. Do such families matter in these elections? The July Charter referendum, will that actually define this country? How will that redefine governance and the role of prime ministers in Bangladesh going forward remains to be seen. The last two important questions: will BNP actually shift away from Khalida Zia's legacy under Tariq Rahman? He wants to start afresh. He says, I'm not just going to be following on my mother's footsteps. Will he actually walk the talk? And last, equally important, how big a threat is Jamaat resurgence for India? Some of the polls do give the party a neck-and-neck leap. Will that lead to major security issues? Let's put that up to Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, who's a former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh, with us on the broadcast. And the voice from Bangladesh is Dr. Ashifur Rahman, who's a principal economist at PRI. Ambassador Chakravarti, let me start with you, sir. We've pretty much laid out the framework in which these polls matter for the region, for India, for Bangladesh itself. My first question to you, sir, as the polling is underway, polls are suggesting, one of them is suggesting neck to neck. Your thoughts on how the outcome from here on will shape or reshape the India-Bangladesh relationship?
Well, I think Bangladesh is entering undoubtedly a new phase in its political life. And the old parties, one of the major parties is outside the election. So there is a choice. Basically, it's a bipolar election. Choice is mainly between the BNP and the Jamaat. And whereas India has been watching this election, and India has reached out, I think, to both the parties, probably a little more to the BNP since we are more familiar with them, and the Jamaat has this stigma of 1971 genocide,
Yes.
and the fact that it is extremely closely linked with Pakistan. So hence it has that stigma, although it is trying to get out of it by saying that they are not that anymore, they have reformed. So both sides are making overtures to India. And India, in fact, India has been generally quiet because we are just watching and seeing we will deal with any government that is democratically elected. That is for sure. But there are lots of issues that, but still, despite all the problems, the trade is still around 14 billion. People coming and going have stopped because of the situation there. So there's been a lot of lawlessness and extortion and various other problems under this interim government, which has been there for almost 18 months now. But let's see, everybody's looking forward to the election because everybody feels that a democratically elected party, whichever comes in power. There are, of course, a lot of below the surface
undercurrents that are at play there. Absolutely, sir. I'm going to come to that in a bit. Dr. Rahman, your first thoughts on these elections that are coming at a time, they are delayed, 18 months overdue, one may say. But how do you see now Bangladesh to be reshaped once these elections are done? Most importantly, because this is an election where you have the Gen Z now essentially getting a chance to voice their opinion in a democratic framework.
Thank you, Gauri. I think, if you take a longer view, Bangladesh had 4 participatory elections since 1991. And unfortunately, elections, good or bad, never led to a real democratic opening. And that is why, our political, space has faced routine ruptures. We faced a rupture in 91. We faced a rupture in 2006. We again faced a rupture in 2024. And this is why it has been very,
we can have a longer discussion, Dr. Rahman, about whether an imperfect democracy is better than an autocracy or an unelected government. We can have that discussion, and trust me, at NDTV we've had those discussions in the last 18 months. But today is a day to talk about the elections that are taking place in Bangladesh. In your assessment, that one important aspect that the Gen Z voter is going to vote on.
I think the Gen Z is definitely going to vote for a progressive Bangladesh. I don't see them voting for a regressive Bangladesh. I mean, they want accountable power. I think that's why you stopped me, because what I wanted to pitch is that what they were frustrated with is elected dictatorships. I think that's the question, that they don't want to give absolute power to anybody, which is why the referendum and the election is equally important to both of them, to them. So I think that is the issue at play, because I feel, and you can see, one of the right-wing parties have not fielded any female candidates. So these are critical signals to the Gen Z voters, and whether that aligns with the vision of Bangladesh is very different. I don't see that. I teach in a university. I talk to my students. I do feel that apprehension, and I don't think that they are have tilted right in that kind of frame, but they are. They were frustrated with the unaccountable political power which they saw, which was not answerable, which was not solving their problem.
All right. So in terms of accountability, will the referendum lead to accountability is an important aspect. But I also need to qualify and tell our viewers that this is also an election where Awami League has been banned. So, when you talk about perfect democracy, when you talk about accountability, this needs to be put out there as well, that one of the main opposition parties, one of the main political parties of Bangladesh, Awami League, has been banned in these elections. We're going to talk more on this, viewers. Come back on the other side of this break, tell you more in terms of the main issues, in terms of how these elections will reshape the region, the India-Bangladesh relationship, the India-Pakistan, China-Bangladesh, their entire relationship and that region. More on that after this break. Stay with us. Ambassador Chakrabarti, slipping bit, before the break, we spoke about the factors that are at play. I want to understand from you, sir, in terms of the deepening Pakistan-Bangladesh nexus under Muhammad Yunus, and possibly that may continue if one of these two parties come to power. How do you see that being handled from New Delhi's point of view, and the concerns and the red flags for India?
Well, I think New Delhi or India is not going to object to normal relations with Pakistan. The problem is that the experience we have had with for example, the BNP Jamaat government is that they tend to, join hands with the ISI of Pakistan to harm India's security interests. Because Pakistan has that one-point agenda, how to harm India. That is their one-point foreign policy in many ways. But Bangladesh is not like that. But yes, they do use sometimes the Pakistani leverage or the Pakistani...
Talking about chicken's neck as well. On several occasions, they've spoken about chicken's neck.
Well, they talk about it. They have talked about it earlier. These are all, a lot of it is rhetoric. Trying to show India that we can actually... We do have some leverage, but the fact is Bangladesh does not have that kind of leverage. So it looks for leverage against India through these kind of rhetoric, or to join hands with China or with Pakistan. But if that happens, we will be watching very carefully how it impinges on our security. And let me assure you that India is not going to let it go this time. It will nip it in the bud if something very wrong happens.
Indeed.
And I think anybody in Bangladesh today knows that.
Right. Dr. Rahman, final question I want to bring to your attention is the fact, cases like Deepu Chandra Das. Even 48 hours before elections, you had another brutal killing of Bangladeshi Hindus. One can decide and talk about this on the cricketing field, but this needs to be decided and spoken out more openly for societies to progress. What happens to the Bangladeshi minorities? Will they matter in the government that comes to power now? Because both Jamaat and BNP have a strong anti-minority, anti-Hindu bias.
I don't agree with the entire statement there. I think given Awami League is not participating in this election, I think the center-right has been trying to woo Awami League voters, and the minority has been traditional Awami League voters. So I do feel that after the election, a new kind of political equilibrium will emerge, where the moderates will try to ensure that the minorities have their voice. But if they don't, they will do it at their own peril. As I keep saying, that if we don't learn from the mistakes of the past and create an exclusive political order, or we don't try to understand that people are deeply frustrated with a winner-takes-all political culture, I think the political peace that the election will bring will be very fragile. So I do feel that whoever wins, and I do feel the moderates will strongly win this election, has a tough job in their hand, because there is a lot of public anger, especially by the younger generation, who wants to see accountability, who wants to see more economic opportunities for them. And they don't want
and not at the cost of Bangladeshi Hindus being marginalized and victimized. Dr. Rahman, I must credit you for at least being a voice of reason here from Bangladesh. Thanks much for speaking to me today on this very special broadcast, along with Ambassador Chakrabarti. High Commissioner, thanks so much for speaking to me on this very special broadcast. Viewers, that brings us an end to this very special broadcast. The focus continues to remain on Bangladesh, because now is when the tough road to recovery really starts, and recovery of both the economy, the society, the country, and the India relationship. Thanks so much for watching.